You're tuned in to the Reality Fred podcast. Food and travel, cool stuff, weird stuff, entertainment, and more. You made the choice to be here, and my friend, you've chosen wisely. Now buckle up, because it's time to get started. It's time for the Reality Fred podcast.
I've spent a lot of time, Joe, slating everybody in the company. Backstage, I'm starting fights off everybody. I've ridiculed everyone on the roster. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I'd like to take this chance to apologise to absolutely nobody. The double champ does what the he wants.
Welcome back, Reality Fred podcast followers. We're back with another podcast, and this one is going to be a lot of fun. Man, I like and love and I breathe all things Irish. And this week we have just an absolute enormous Irish story that's been really, unfolding for weeks, months, and really years. But we're just 4 days away from the Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather boxing match. Now, I'm not really into boxing. Never really been into the MMA fighting. It's just not my thing. It's not something I pay attention to. Every few years there's the big fight. Floyd Mayweather had his big fight a few years ago. There's always the pay-per-view specials. And these things get a lot of hype down the stretch, and even for the casual observer, not necessarily the casual fan, but just even for the casual observer, eventually there's enough hype in the media to get you excited and at least curious to see who's going to win. And of course, that's what it's all about, selling pay-per-view subscriptions for the big event. But this time for me, it's a little bit different. Conor McGregor is a guy that I have been kind of following in the background, over the past several years, mainly because of his just outrageous, bigger than life persona. But the dude wins. The dude's a fighter. He catches your attention. And especially if you're like me and you just love all things Irish, to see the testosterone, the excitement, and the victories by the Irish Conor McGregor. So I've been getting excited this week, and I thought, this would be a perfect time, because I think there's a lot of people out there that, like myself, that are just, less than the casual observer when it comes to boxing and fights and things like that, and while we have the big event coming up. So what I wanted to do is, well, first of all, I'm going to lay it down that I'm clearly on Team McGregor, as I'm basically, this podcast is about Conor McGregor. And but I didn't really know all of his background per se, and I figured that I would do a podcast, look into the background, kind of put the pieces together like I like to do for my podcast, and basically tell the Conor story my way. So that's what tonight's podcast is going to be about. Conor McGregor. And I'm going to try to get this out on the internet tonight because, again, like I said, the big event's only 4 days away. So this is going to be, I definitely want this out there before the big event. I'll put my thoughts and predictions on the big fight at the end of the podcast, and we'll just have to see how things actually unfold 4 days from now. And if you don't know what the big fight is, stay tuned. I'm going to walk you through that, and that's actually going to be incredibly fun. It's been something that has been unfolding over social media beef for quite some time now, and even just relatively started kind of by happenstance on an evening that Conor McGregor was visiting the Conan O'Brien talk show. So it's really interesting how it all came about, but it's also groundbreaking. It's something that's never been done before. It's never been seen before. It's probably something that people have talked about for years, but never really thought it would happen. And Conor McGregor's making it happen. So I'm going to put that to the side for a little bit. We'll get into all of that. So, basically what I want to do here is, the way we're going to go through this is, I want to go over a little bit about the background of Conor McGregor, where he's from, how he got into fighting, and then we're going to go through his fighting career. So what we'll do is we'll talk about how he started, how he went professional with the, see if I have it in my notes here, he didn't go right into the UFC, so when he started professional, he started with the CWFC, the Cage Warriors Fighting Championship. And then eventually moved up to UFC, and that's when we'll kind of get specific into his fights. We'll talk about his championship fights and how all of that has led us to where we are this week, with probably the single biggest fight of all time. It really is. I mean, definitely financially, this is being called the $1 billion fight. It may or may not actually equate to $1 billion, but it's certainly very close to it. It's expected to be probably at least $500 million in total revenues. It's absolutely insane how big this fight is, and it's because of Conor McGregor. Now, yes, Floyd Mayweather is the gentleman that he's going to be fighting, and he's no stranger to huge fights with big purses. But Conor McGregor is taking the world by storm. He has for a couple years, and when he fights, the cash register starts making those ka-ching, ka-ching noises, and he knows it. And that's why this thing is so huge. So, then what I want to do is talk about, after we go through his fighting timeline, I want to take a step back and talk about a moment that in Conor's life that really changed his life, his view of life, and his philosophy on life that he got from a book. I'll tease that, but it's basically the law of attraction, and it's a very profound part of his life. He talks about it every day. It's in his social media. So to understand him, you have to understand his passion with this law of attraction and how it really did change his life, how he went from being a plumber's apprentice to now fighting in the biggest financial fight, or the biggest fight with the biggest financial dollar signs stamped all over this thing of all time. And he was just a plumber's apprentice not too long ago. And then from there, we'll get back to this whole match with Floyd Mayweather and how this came about. The other thing I want to put out there, though, is that in preparation for doing this, I got a lot of quotes here, and I'll do my best Conor impersonations when I can, but I decided that you really, really have to let Conor speak for himself. So after I do the recording, I'm going to go back and I'm going to dump in some audio files from YouTube. You've got to hear him speak, and you've got to hear the excitement, and you've got to hear the passion, and some of the things you really just need to hear come from his mouth, and some of the things that others say about him that get him all excited and things like that. So, and then the online version that I do, the blog page that I'll put on at realityfred.com. I'm just going to litter that thing with all sorts of great resources, mainly YouTube videos that are just fantastic to really just fill this in. So I am going to do my best with putting this all together and laying it down, but also giving the resources. I'm going to take it up a notch by dropping in some audio files in the post-production here tonight. So we've got a lot on the table, and what better way to get into a story of an Irishman. Then I got a little bit of Jameson here, so... All right, sláinte. Let's get started. So, let me grab my paperwork here. So, let me move some stuff out of the way, because I want to stay nice and organized here. So I've got everything printed out, extensive research here. A lot of the stuff we're going to be, basically a lot of the stuff I'm talking about up front, this is all from Wikipedia, but I kind of went through it and, kept it to the stuff that I felt was important and made it as succinct as I could. So, Conor Anthony McGregor was born July 14th, 1988 in Crumlin, Dublin. Say that 3 times fast. Crumlin, Dublin, over there in Ireland. The son of Tony and Margaret McGregor. In his youth, Conor played football, and at the age of 12, he also began boxing at the Crumlin Boxing Club. And don't forget that. Age of 12, he began boxing. So he's no stranger to boxing, which we'll come back to at the end. In 2006, at the age of 17, he commenced a plumbing apprenticeship. But during this apprenticeship, he would eventually meet future UFC fighter Tom Egan. And they soon started hanging out and training together in mixed martial arts, otherwise known as MMA, mixed martial arts. So it was at the age of 17 that all got started with the MMA training. So now, early February 17, 2007. So early 2007, February 17th, at the age of 18, McGregor made his mixed martial arts debut in an amateur fight against Kieran Campbell for the Irish Ring of Truth promotion in Dublin. And of course, in true Conor McGregor style, he was victorious via a TKO in the first round. And that's something that we will hear over and over. So his very first fight, victorious, first round TKO. Following the fight, he would then turn professional and was signed by the Irish Cage of Truth promotion. In 2008, McGregor began training at the Straight Blast Gym, otherwise known as SBG, the Straight Blast Gym, in Dublin under John Kavanagh. And folks, that's a relationship that still goes on to this day. Very, very important and special relationship. So now let's get into the beginning of his professional career. We just talked about his first amateur fight, his one and only apparently, and then he went professional. So he's now in the CWFC, the Cage Warriors and Fighting Championship. So we're going to go through this a little bit and then get into his UFC pedigree, and we'll have some fun with that. But first, before we get into the UFC, it's important to just know a little bit about the background of his fights before going to the UFC. So we'll get into that now, and especially because I want to mention the championships and why that matters. So on March 9th, 2008, McGregor had his first professional MMA bout as a lightweight, defeating Gary Morris with a second-round TKO. After McGregor won his second fight against Mo Taylor, he made his featherweight debut in a loss via submission against Armitage Sitnikov. Let's try that again. Artemij Sitnikov. After a victory at featherweight in his next bout against Stephen Bailey, McGregor contemplated a different career path before his mother contacted his coach, John Kavanagh, and reinvigorated him to continue pursuing mixed martial arts. McGregor then won his next fight, also at featherweight, against Conor Dillon, before moving back to lightweight for a fight against Joseph Duffy, where he received his second professional loss after submitting to an arm triangle choke. Following this, during 2011 and 2012, McGregor went on an 8-fight win streak, during which he won both the featherweight and lightweight championships, making him the first European professional mixed martial artist to hold titles in 2 divisions simultaneously. In February 2013, UFC Ultimate Fighting Championship president Dana White made a trip to Dublin, Ireland to receive a gold medal of honorary patronage from Trinity College, and was inundated with requests to sign McGregor to the UFC. After a meeting with McGregor and talking with UFC CEO Lorenzo Fertitta, White offered him a contract days later. So now we're heading down the Irish River there with Conor to the UFC. All begins in 2013. We're going to talk about some of the early career before we get into the championship pursuits. So now it's 2013. McGregor, in February 2013,